Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé, the other way. Let's watch.
The ticket was already bought because I was told that it was done.
I was very foolish. I'm just thinking about myself.
Do you fully trust him now, Deavan?
Trust takes time. It takes a lot of time. He's broken the trust by lying.
Okay, so interesting. She came back to the States because she didn't want to bring Drusilla to a small, cramped apartment or home. And she said an ultimatum that, I'm not coming back until, or a requirement, stipulation, I'm not coming back to South Korea and you're not going to see your kid until you have a job and an apartment for the four of us. And then he lied to her and said that he did have those things lined up. And she bought a ticket, and then he revealed, I'm sorry, I was lying. And then he is taking responsibility for that lie. We see other cast members on the show where when they lie or they're caught in a lie, they will get defensive, like, well, I was just saying that because you're such a B word. But he just takes full responsibility right away, as he's done before. He's like, yeah, I was just being selfish, and he's crying. He seems genuinely remorseful about it, but he keeps doing it. He keeps lying this way. So why would he do that? Some sort of deep shame, some sort of schema as a play. Now, my main hypothesis for Jihoon is dependent personality spectrum. I don't know. I would have to get him into my office. I would assess him over several months before I could conceptualize him as such. But if we're going to use this show as a jumping off point to learn about things, why would, if someone did have dependent personality spectrum, why would they lie in this way? Well, possibly out of desperation of, sometimes it's helpful to think about people with dependent personality spectrum as not what their age is. I think he's 29, 30. Not to think of him as a 30-year-old, but to think of him as like a 7-year-old. 7-year-olds will, when they're desperate, will lie about things. Like your 7-year-old is nervous about something at school, like they have some kind of project that they have to get done. And the parents say, okay, for you to come with us this weekend on a special trip, you have to complete your project. And the kid is terrified about the project. Something goes wrong. They're socially anxious about it. They believe they can't do it because they have dependent personality spectrum, and they believe that they're going to screw it up. They're going to fail at it. So they put it off. They procrastinate. They put it off. And the last moment, the parents say, okay, did you complete the project? Because if you didn't, then you're not coming with us on this special trip. And the kid says, yes, I did do it. I did do it. Because of the shame, because sometimes kids will lie, they try to get away with things. They haven't developed that ability to really have other options. One of the reasons why people lie is because they don't have other options. 7-year-olds don't have a lot of options. They don't know how to communicate about things. An older person would say something like, I didn't turn it in, but I am so desperate to go on this trip with you right now that please take me on this trip, or some other kind of procedure, but younger people and dependent people who are older, they tend to have like one or two options that will become available to them because they just don't have a lot of practice doing things on their own. And you'll lie as a way, one of the options, all of us have the option of lying whenever we run into a situation like this. But we don't, because we have 99 other options from which we can choose from that are better than lying. But if you only have one or two options, and for Jihoon, his two options are either I tell her that I haven't figured things out yet, and by consequence, she won't come here, and I am not going to have my best friend and my wife Deavan with me, but I'm also not going to have my children with me. I'm terrified. I'm lonely. I want to see my children. It's very important to him. So I tell the truth and I don't get to see my family, or I lie and I get to see my family. And those are the only two options available because of lack of experience with doing things on their own where they can learn from their mistakes and build their repertoire. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is that he has such deep shame about being a failure, which a lot of people will have. Avoidant personality spectrum people will have that sometimes, and sometimes dependent people as well, that they will do anything to cover up that shame. They're so ashamed of it that they would rather lie than admit their shame. Who knows? But it is interesting. And it's just another incursion on Deavan's trust. As he continues to lie in this way, she is going to have her trust erode and erode, I'm guessing.
Does your mother wish you had married a Korean woman?
Yes.
Oh, holy. What? I had no idea. I had no idea she felt that way.
So she is learning for the first time that her mother-in-law wishes that Jihoon had married a Korean woman, which is pretty common around the world. And it's unfortunate, I think, particularly for me, given that I am of mixed race, that people still hold these points of view. Now, maybe I could be convinced of some pros to that point of view. Let me know in the comments if you consider if you can think of any pros to wanting people to marry within their own culture. I mean, certainly you can imagine the convenience of being able to communicate. She doesn't speak Korean. The mother doesn't speak English very well. So they're having a hard time communicating. But beyond that, it's hard to know why people are so adamant about that with their children. And I've seen Korean people do this. Not all Koreans. There's a lot of Koreans. There's many people. It's a very diverse culture. But a lot of my Korean American friends will have situations like this where the Korean family comes to the States, the kid is born in the States, is raised in the States, and meets various different people of various different ethnicities. And law of averages, they're going to meet someone outside of their Korean American culture, and then they fall in love and they want to get married, and the parents, in almost every situation I can think of, supremely disapproves of that because of their child marrying outside of the Korean culture. So it's common. It's a cultural element. We might be able to consider it that. It doesn't mean that it's right, though. It doesn't mean that it's okay. It doesn't mean that it's not inherently limiting, but especially to Jihoon, limiting to the relationship between the mother and her. I mean, now that she hears this, how is Deavan going to feel about it? Is it going to hurt their relationship? So, it's unfortunate that people hold these points of view. Now, if you can think of a good reason as to why people hold these cultural values, let me know in the comments.
No idea. If they don't accept me, then I don't have to accept them back.
Do you feel judged by Jihoon's mother?
Yes. To see her say she wanted someone who was cute and friendly is very upsetting.
And I just want to say that for the United States, we have had laws on the books preventing people from marrying outside of their ethnicity or their race. And at the time when my parents got married in 1963, just a couple states over in Wyoming, it was illegal, if I remember right, for Asians and white people to get married. So when my parents got married, and they lived in Spokane, Washington, and they crossed the border into Idaho and eloped. And they were almost to Wyoming, which is illegal for them to get married. Imagine that, right? I think the law was removed in 1965, but still. And the reason why my parents had to elope is because mainly my mom's family, who is white, her family was very, very much against the relationship, and my parents had to have a secret love affair. They met in high school and for years had to keep their relationship extremely on the DL. My dad experienced a little bit of that as well as a Japanese American, but there was less of that concern. But there was still hopes that he would marry within the Japanese American culture, but it wasn't as adamant as a requirement for him. And they also lived in Spokane, which is a pretty white area, particularly back then. And they moved to Seattle because there was more diversity out here and more acceptance for interracial marriages. So whenever I hear about people saying to their children, you must marry within your race, I think about all of that pain and all that suffering that even just my own family went through, and it doesn't leave a good taste in my mouth.
I speak Korean. What are you gonna do? Like make hand gestures and smile? Like,
I tried. I was respecting their culture. And I was told you're not supposed to speak to them unless they spoke to you. And they never spoke to me. I think she blames everything on me. At the same time, she's not holding her son up to those responsibilities.
Okay, interesting. So I've been trying to find more evidence, not to bolster my idea, but trying to prove or disprove evidence along the lines of dependent personality for Jihoon. And we just heard a little bit of data from Deavan saying that the mother does not hold him responsible. Now, what does that mean? You know, he's 30 years old, and according to Deavan, she doesn't require Jihoon to do things on his own, doesn't require him to pay his own bills or to live on his own or to act like an adult, to be a proper 30-year-old with age-appropriate responsibilities. And sometimes that is the genesis of dependent personality. Usually it's either because the parent is anxious about their child, they're worried that their child, if given freedoms, something bad will happen, and the parent cannot tolerate that, and so they keep the child in a dependent role. Or the parent has controlling nature, a controlling aspect to them, either from attachment insecurity or modeling parenting from their own childhood, where they exert a lot of control over the child, and the child isn't given the opportunity to learn from their own mistakes. We don't hear any evidence of control. We don't really hear any evidence of anxiety, but we do hear evidence from Deavan that the mother doesn't allow him or doesn't push him to do things, which would lend itself towards an anxiety hypothesis. But I'm really just grasping at straws here. We would have to ask Jihoon, we'd have to ask the parents, so who knows?
Pregnant. But it takes two people to make a baby. And I'm sick and tired of being blamed for everything.
he hasn't really stood up for me when it comes to our relationship. I still don't think he understands that it hurt me.
It's just ridiculous.
Coming up.
All right. Well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.